So we just finished up a great episode, Like Father, Like Son. This is going to be part B of the conversation that we had just had. I think we had a ton of fun. Some of the topics were heavy, and some of them will need to be prayed through or talked through, but we kind of ended a little bit lighter, thank God, on some things. Apparently, you got to wait for the end of it, but apparently Pastor Deryck is rich. So you're going to have to wait and see that thing. Anything you guys would add?
I hope you guys are ready for some honest dialogue. We want to lead well. We want to lead with vulnerability, not stupidity. But we do want to talk about the condition of the church and what we see nowadays, and some things that I think need to be fixed, some things that need to be adjusted, some things that need to be healed. Yeah. And I think this conversation will help you with that.
Amen. It's going to have generational impact, so get ready.
Can you talk a little bit about your heart behind, there's so many cultural things within the Christian community on vulnerability. I don't know that it's always done correctly. I've seen some stuff where I felt great about, some stuff that was like a little cringy.
Oh, definitely.
But also Lada and I are literally on an email chain together right now with actually I think it's the same place that you guys go, but just like I'm trying to get a therapist and I want to go to that place and I'm on a waiting list. And I've been on one. I'm like, is there any way to get off the waiting list? Because I'm like, don't I need to like beg to get healthy, So like, how has that looked for you guys?
It's because my staff's probably dominating.
Yeah, it's like there's so...
I have preached it so hard. A ton of people are going.
Yeah.
I will give a quick little plug. Shout out to Harbor Christian Counseling.
Yeah.
They have been incredible for Connect Church. This will probably get a lot of people to go towards them, but there is a wait list. I swear by them, and they've been fantastic.
And I'm ahead of all of you who are trying to go in there.
But for Harbor, please let Mike Tirpak in. Number one, he's a great man. Number two, he needs help.
Yes, need help. I'm asking for it.
Right, we need him.
Lada, his wife, no, I'm kidding.
But talk to us about the vulnerability piece.
Yeah.
So how do you do it appropriately? And
well, I want to make a distinction and a delineation. I think there's a difference between stupidity and vulnerability. So the difference is vulnerability is sharing scars. Stupidity is sharing wounds. Mm-hmm. And so a wound is a current wound that is desperately bleeding. And I do think as leaders, we have to have responsibility and discernment on where am I at on this spectrum. Mm. So we all have, and we're all human. And so one of the things that I love that you said in a leader circle, we're talking to a bunch of our pastors, our up and coming pastors, and you basically said, hey, let other people honor you. You have to humanize yourself, though. You remember that? So when people see us on a podcast, and, a lot of times we'll go to gyms and people be like, is that PD? That's PD? It happens to me on occasion. And they'll be like, I seen you online. I seen your stuff. So they naturally put you on a pedestal. Now we're literally on a stage right now. So sometimes when we're speaking as an individual to, 1,000 people on a weekend, people literally put you on a pedestal. So what we have to do is actually humanize ourselves to put ourselves down a little bit more.
I used to do that for years. If you remember back in the day, before we were multi-site, I would intentionally get off the platform, put my pulpit on the floor, because I was trying to communicate to them. The only thing that separates me from you is responsibility, principally. And then practically, the only reason I'm on the stage is so you can see me and hear me.
That's right.
Wow.
But see, the message that has been communicated, because we don't communicate that principle, we don't communicate that practicality, everybody is just by osmosis watching that and saying, you're here and I'm here. Mm-hmm. That's been happening for literally like decades after decades after decades. So that's why I say, let them honor you. Let man praise you. Don't praise yourself.
It's scripture. That's scripture. Let another man praise you out of his own lips. You don't do it. Let another man do that. So I think let other people honor you. You have to humanize you first and foremost. That being said, I love what Craig Rochelle says in his podcast. He talks about how, people will always follow a leader who is real over one who's right. Essentially, he says people will relate with your weaknesses more than your strengths. And so what I've found in the moments where I am appropriately vulnerable, I find I gain way more influence as opposed to lose it. Yeah. It's like a tool.
Yeah.
Now, I think it can be emotionally manipulative at times, so you always have to check the motives and the heart. Yep. But there is a difference between stupidity and vulnerability. Scars are these are wounds that you can still see. Like I have a scar right here on my elbow. You probably can't see it, but there's this big old scar right here. But it has almost grafted in my skin. It looks normal, but you can still see it if it's there. And I'm grateful for it because it's always a memory of a time where my buddy and I were wrestling and I got this big old cut And so it's just a lesson learned. That's essentially a scar. It's a lesson learned. But some people have wounds and they haven't learned from their lessons. And so if you don't learn from something, it's going to be repeated. It becomes a pattern. So I don't even know where. I feel like there's 1,000 different ways we can go on this. That being said, I love what the body of Christ is doing with these conversations, with podcasts like this. That is, people are dying for vulnerable leaders.
I think
they're dying for them.
For me, there's a lot in here that I don't know if I can articulate, but I want to talk about like how people can use vulnerability to manipulate, because there is a piece of that. But I do believe that principally individuals, Christians, leaders, that when you learn how to be vulnerable and do that well, I say vulnerability, which is counterintuitive, leads to stability. I think you're more inclined to be a stable person if you can humanize yourself, if you can open up, if you can be transparent, and principally get as close to the line of indiscretion. It's like discretion and secrecy. You're trying to walk the line, not indiscretion, discretion and secrecy. So I grew up in a culture where we kept everything secret. Whatever was going on in life, you keep it secret. And then, but what you can do is you can go the other way now in the current generation, where it's just like you just throw all this stuff out there.
That's why appropriate vulnerability matters.
There's no tact anymore. There's no discretion. And so it's like there's no PG-13, PG-13. Everything's just, X-rated, so to speak, exploitation of people's lives. And so I think depending on the circle you're in, the influence, meaning when I say circle, influence, how much you have, how mature that group is, that's when, so leader circle, which for us is a pastor's training group that you're in, Mike, like that's where you see the raw and the real of PD. Like, I'm just going to tell you some stuff. It's different there. Sunday morning, that's not even the church. Those are people, a lot of those people are seekers, they're frequent flyers, fringe. They're not like family, core. Yep. So I'm not going to tell all these stories and these vulnerable moments, but I am going to do it with some people because they desperately need it. It's going to protect them. It's going to save them and help them and keep them from falling and failing.
Well, and it protects you from being blackmailed.
100. Yeah. So yeah, the more, the smaller the circle, that vulnerability, which, you kind of talk about like how to keep and prevent people from failing and falling. This vulnerability thing is highly protective, not only of others, but of the individual who's being vulnerable. Right. And that is a missing art. But one of the things I was just going to say was looking at today's world, even some of the current failings and fallings, like when you tell, there's a part where, and this, I don't know how I can do this because I didn't expect it, but where you can tell certain things as a leader, but you withhold certain things, and it's endearing people to you, not actually helping people. Do you know, it's like you can say enough about your past to make somebody admire you as opposed to keep them from doing the same thing or put a healthy fear of God in their life. It's more like that's the man. And I think we have these rock star, iconic, bigger than life leaders who in the old days it would be they never told you anything. It looked like they never made a mistake. They couldn't fall. They're superhuman and that was super discouraging. Now you see some of these like high profile people and they're telling certain things, but they're withholding some critical information, and it's coercive and manipulative, and it's bringing people into a circle of trust while they're hiding.
If you're in secrets,
sin will find you out.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's scary to me.
If you're in that secret sin, are you going, like, there's going to be somebody listening to this and there is something that is like tormenting them. All right. And maybe they're in a pastoral position. And I was listening to Lights On. Is it Lights On with Carl Lentz? And they were just kind of talking about when you are a pastor, you aren't just going to share something. You're probably going to lose your job. Right. Which is a different responsibility. So
that is so hard.
Yeah.
I would say for a younger generation leader, you can speak for yourself on some of that stuff, but the pastoral job and responsibility, I think carries a different weight. And I'm not saying we're more important than anybody else. I'm not saying that at all, but A spiritual leader has way different standards than anybody else. So when a celebrity, like an actor falls and commits sin and adultery, honestly, people expect it, like, whatever, he can go in a movie again.
Yeah.
Spiritual leader, like, yeah, your job's at risk. Your family is at risk.
Reputation,
Now,
family.
your words, even if you did come back, have very little weight to them. Can I listen to that? Did this discredit everything you've ever said before? Like, we have some of those conversations all the time.
Yeah.
And it's just a different standard because people put high standards on men and women of God, and as they should, because the Bible puts it that way. But that's why it makes it this more dangerous place. And people don't hear this ever. I'm just going to say some of the stuff, and you can tell me if we can go on it or not, or cut it. We hear a lot about spiritual abuse from a pastor to a congregation. You never hear about a pastor being abused by their congregation, ever. That's never a story out there. I'm not saying we are in that situation, but there are comments, there are conversations, there is this utilitarian relationship or transactional relationship that people have with their pastor. It's, I need something from you. I need information. I need a Bible answer. I need prayer. I need counseling. I need coaching. I need a sermon. I need to get it from you. Mm-hmm. And then when a pastor shows their humanity, you can almost lose all the credibility and all the influence in a second like that, and then they can just turn you like that. And that is very hard and hurtful, to be honest, a lot of the times. You hear nobody talk about some of this stuff because it's hard to even talk about, because it's even scary to say some of this stuff out loud because you don't know if people are going to weaponize it.
I'll give you an example. Devon has heard this story many times because he's part of the story, but when Stacy and I were dating.
I am the story.
Devon is the story. Stacy and I were dating. We were having sex before marriage, and Stacy got pregnant. And I remember my father was a pastor. I was a PK, and I can remember calling back home, and I've got to tell my father, my girlfriend. I got my girlfriend pregnant, and this was really hard, and I struggle to share this. We'll have to talk about whether we put this out there, but he said, hold on a second. He put the phone down. He started praying in tongues. I could hear him. Then he shut the door and he came back to the phone and he said, son, here's the thing. I'm going to have to talk to the board of elders, and depending on what they say will determine whether I get to stay in ministry or not because of what you've done. Because if an elder cannot handle the affairs of his family, he cannot lead God's church. And you understand, son? And then all I remember, I was like, that everything's black after that. I hung up the phone, and I didn't even fully get it until really later in life, where I realized you're putting the weight of your entire ministry on a decision I made.
Wow.
You're casting that your whole life and everything is going to be affected by one mistake that I made. There wasn't a gracious response. There wasn't concern about, Stacy, is she okay? What's the next step? That wasn't the first response. The first response was sacrificing ministry, and he was conditioned for that. So in his defense,
it wasn't his fault. That was
the normal. That's what he taught. That was what he was taught. That was the normal. So I'm not even upset with my father. At the time, I was confused as all get out. And I think what's created a problem with vulnerability is we have wrong targets. The target is be in ministry, be successful in ministry. And so when I have this thing in my phone, when I do restoration for pastors, we have a restoration, like a target, we call it a progression for restoration. And we drive these circles. The center of the circle is the number one thing we're trying to do with this fallen leader is restore intimacy with God. In the inner circle. The next circle is to restore intimacy and relationship with his family. The next circle after that is to restore relationship within the local church. The next circle on the outside of that is to restore reputation within the community. And if possible, the outer circle is restore back into ministry.
Wow.
So it's the exact opposite of what messaging comes through, and that's why people don't want to open up. They can't tell a leader because the target isn't, I'm concerned about your intimacy with God. No, the target is, is this going to mess up your ability to lead worship on Sunday morning? Is this going to mess up your continuation as a staff person carrying all this weight? Because where am I going to go with that? And that's why people are shuffling sin around.
And it's all fear of man based too.
It's terrible.
It's all fear of man.
It's fear, man. It's church politics.
Yeah.
And it creates this hiddenness.
Yeah.
It creates this secrecy.
Yeah.
And then it becomes a prison. And what I don't think gets discussed is how we create environments for that.
Yeah.
Safe
As
harbor
a church
and-
and safety. And yes, I don't think people rest with the fact that there are consequences for their sin, or there are consequences for decisions made. But when there's shame attached to it, that is not just internal. There's already going to be internal guilt, conviction.
Right.
But then when there's public shame attached to it, public shame is the cherry on top. It makes it 10 times worse. It's what creates secrecy in environments like that. And that's why appropriate vulnerability matters so much. That's why creating cultures where you can be gracious, and the first thing that is a response is, we love you. We see the image of God on the inside of you. He who is without sin casts the first stone. Nobody throws anything. And then it's, okay, go and sin no more. That's after. But that conversation and that story, every single pastor has a story like that has conditioned them or created this internal prison where it's terrifying that I can't show my true self. And it's hard.
That's one thing I like about, I haven't watched much of the new Carl Lentz podcast, which, has gone huge, I want to say one thing that, I'm attaching a name and I'm saying this, but I like a lot of what I see because it's giving us an opportunity to see the raw footage on what happened and and ownership too. Like I have seen, to the extent that I've been watching, I've seen full ownership
really
instead of
appreciate
playing the victim, casting aspersions on leadership, making it all about everybody else. That's been a refreshing thing because I think you don't see that a lot. You see a lot of the blame shift, the victimization and stuff. The only concern I have is I hope there's enough health before you went and put your whole family out in front of the whole world.
Again.
That could be highly exploitive if it was premature. And that kind of makes me go, ooh, are you sure you want to do this? And when he posted #1 podcast or something like that, and I was like, is that the message you want? So there were some triggers for me. But when I separate from maybe some old habits that he has with that, I thought, wow, this is really good for people to see because it's hitting a nerve because nobody's talking about this stuff in general. We like to talk about this stuff,
Totally.
but we don't have that same platform. But people need that.
And
they
the conversations,
need to pull it out.
the conversations are happening privately by everybody, but publicly the conversations are scary to talk about because we don't know the repercussions of it.
Sure.
And particularly to Pastor Carl, I guess now, was my hero. He gave me permission to be me in many senses. I'm a basketball player. I love to preach. I love sermons. I'm an evangelist in my core. So much of who he was, I felt like was me. Maybe there was a season where it was to an unhealthy degree, but I feel like he helped me introduce me to me. God used him as an image and a hero. When that failure came out and became known, it was devastating.
I remember it hurt you a lot.
Oh,
we had talked about it a little bit.
Yeah. I met him a couple different times. I got to see him in person, and I processed with that many different times. I do think from that season, it produced a passion in me where I wanted to deal with my own internal stuff. Because I did a study in Scripture. Samson, David. There was another one I had in here. Samson and David, essentially, they were not bad men. They were broken men that did a foolish thing because of their brokenness. And I think it's not our badness; it's our brokenness that leads us to do stupid things like that. So I don't think Carl's not a bad man.
It's good.
Contrary to what tabloids, all the people that turned on him, including the spiritual community, he says himself, "This was my deep brokenness and secrecy that eventually exploded." And I do think he's a cautionary tale for a lot of people. I think he's hyperbolic in many senses because his platform, he was larger than life. He was not just a celebrity in church world. He was an actual celebrity. So, but if we think we can't learn lessons from his life and his vulnerability,
You're crazy.
you're crazy. And I actually think you're foolish if you don't.
Yeah.
So to me, all that communicated, not, oh, look at how bad Carl was. It was, instead of me looking through a window, it was me looking
How
at the mirror.
does that happen?
Yeah, it was looking at me. I'm like, I got to deal with some stuff because I don't want that to happen in my life.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful I have an image like that.
Yeah. And maybe we can tie a bow on this conversation. If there's a pastor who's listening, it could be any circumstance, And there's secret sin, but there's also this intense fear of, I don't want to be like that tabloid. I don't want that to happen to my family. I understand this is happening. I want to talk to somebody. Do I go to a therapist? Do I need to confront my church? Do I need to talk to my church? Like, if there's maybe some practical stuff for a young leader or maybe even a lead pastor, who there's some hidden stuff, there's some secret sin, and they don't know what to do and they don't know how to process it.
I get the pressure that they can feel, and above that pressure, in my opinion, is still pride. There's a pride. And I think another lie or deception sometimes that we buy, a lie we buy, is that this thought that what I have is good. I don't think you're fully loved till you're fully known by
Facts.
someone or somewhere. So they can look at their world and think, I can't give all this up. I'm like, well, you don't really have what you think you have because you're not fully known, so you're not fully loved.
That's right.
And so I think we rob ourselves in our relationship with God and relationship with others if we don't allow ourselves to be fully known by someone.
That's right.
Not everyone, but someone. And that's one thing I've learned is, like, it doesn't have to be the whole. I don't have to be vulnerable in front of the whole church. No way.
That's stupid. That'd be foolish.
That's just indiscreet, foolish, poor judgment. And unfortunately, some people do that. And I think you see pastors doing that, if they.
And that's where I think the emotional manipulation actually comes, because you're endearing them to you instead of a God.
Yes.
Yeah,
I'm not going to be fake. So if I cuss behind the scenes, I'm going to cuss at the pulpit. No, that's just
foolishness.
Stupid. That's just poor. That's just very, very immature.
Yeah, what the? Stupid. What are you doing? Defense mechanism.
So you're not allowing yourself to be loved. And then practically, I just think that you got to pursue, even if it's a little scary, some strategic relationships. And in my case, like, the bigger the aircraft carrier, when it's not a little tugboat anymore, I have to find big leaders that can handle whatever I would tell them or whatever is going on. And so that takes work, but they're there, and you got to put yourself out there and make those investments, and be the pursuer too. Like, that's one thing I've learned. Like, my pastor knows all my stuff, both my spiritual fathers, they know all my stuff. And at one time I had 3 spiritual fathers, and I was fully known, the whole kit and caboodle. And I remember one of them, when I was talking to one of them, it was like, I felt so bad afterwards. I had so much shame afterwards because I thought this is going to change the relationship. It absolutely did not change the relationship. It strengthened the relationship. It was the exact opposite of how I felt. And I had to learn from that experience, like, there's a principle here. It's just, you now are loved. You now are fully accepted. And there was just like this freedom that this person knows me, accepts me. And like we talked about earlier, I can't be blackmailed. And so, yeah. And I think too, not just being fully known, but also fully accountable. So I do think sometimes we tell people things, they would never hold us accountable. They would never stick their finger in our eye. They would never show up at our front door and say, you better stop this and this has got to end. And if you don't, then you're going to put me in a position where I have to do something.
That's an enabler.
Exactly. So a lot of times we're going to people, it's like your girlfriend holding you accountable. We're in the backseat of the car, 2 a.m, and we're each other's accountability party. What in the world? That's what pastors are doing.
Help
sometimes.
me to be accountable.
I've got a brother who.
Oh yeah, that's.
I got a brother who I tell everything. And meanwhile, he's a porn addict and sleeping around on his wife. But he understands me.
But you can do that as a lead pastor, because there's got to be somebody who's watching. They're like, yeah, but if I go, am I going to lose my job?
I'm saying the lead pastor should go outside the church, not inside the church. Okay. Maybe I didn't specify that.
Can I add one thing? So, expose your sin, or it'll expose you. Period.
Yes.
Kill it, it'll kill you. If you don't, it'll kill you. I've taught you need 3 relationships. Some seasons require all 3. Some seasons require a couple of them. You need a pastor. You need a person you trust, and you need a professional. So for me, I have to start. I feel like for some of my just internal world, I wanted to go to a professional. I need to untie some yarn up in my head of like, I need somebody to know how to surgically do some of that stuff.
Yep.
So I think if you don't have somebody you trust or you don't know who to go to.
Natalia's writing in the chat right now.
Yeah,
Praise the
right.
Lord. Thank you, Jesus.
My wife and I do have a great openness and a vulnerability that has really launched from first of my relationship with my parents, but then also having a professional has been very helpful. And I don't know how long that's going to go, how long that's going to last. I do believe in being preventative about some of these things as opposed to reactive. I think most people wait such a long time. And for me, therapy, counseling is not for people that are crazy. It's for people that refuse to go crazy. That's what I believe. So I think you need a pastor, you need a professional, you need a person you trust. You have those three, I think you're going to be safe. You got people that are helping your spirit, your soul, and then your relationships. It's just some relational dynamics there. You have those things, you'll have a safety net, and one who has multiple or many counselors finds safety, Proverbs talks about. So I think those would be really important dynamics. If you are a pastor, I know you referenced the pastor. I think every pastor should have a professional, to be honest. The job is too hard. If you're a pastor, I would say you should have people in your life for sure, but I would probably say if you're a pastor, start professionally. If you're a parent, a person in the church, business leader, entrepreneur, have a conversation with your pastor.
Yeah.
They are there for spiritual guidance, counsel, to equip the saints, and to shepherd sheep.
Yeah.
To help your soul. So
you
should have some people in your life that you can go to for some of those things.
And pastors can go to their pastors too.
And
so
pastors, all pastors should have a pastor. If you want authority, you should be under authority.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's why we're so familial too, because we don't want it to be like it's all about your production. It's all about, as opposed to your spiritual progress. We want it to be not your performance, but our personal relationship. So we work hard to make it, so that you're seen as a son. Sons don't get kicked out of the family.
Facts.
They get disciplined, but they don't get kicked out.
I have to say one thing that is spicy. I know we're wrapping this conversation up, but I need to say it. Not all churches are safe, though.
Yeah.
I hate saying that. More churches are safe than there are not, so I don't want to follow the tabloids and all the cultural trends, but not all churches are safe. There are many churches, though, that are Bible teaching, Bible believing, safe, where they can accept you for who you are, but they won't affirm your foolishness or your sin, and you want a place that is full of grace, truth, and gives you time to heal. Not weaponize your vulnerability. We do not weaponize vulnerability here.
Yeah.
But you need a place, because God is perfect, the church is not. So you're going to find flaws in every church. But not all churches are safe. So you want to find the ones that are and go fully and invest and be open, naked, and vulnerable with them to say, this is who I am. These are mistakes I made. I want to get better. I want to get healthy. Can you help me with that? Start with humility. I'm telling you it'll go well for you.
And there's little things you can look for. I can't help but camp on some things because you're triggering them. But you want to be in a culture where, like, some people don't go there with their pastors or mentors or that person because the whole culture is everybody's telling everybody secrets. I've heard this for years. It's just like, I don't feel, there's nothing in this church that makes me feel safe. And so I can't tell you, because I know you're going to, based on my experience and my past, you're going to tell somebody, they're going to tell somebody, and it just gets passed down the line. We call them prayer requests, but it's just passing of secrets. And so one of the things that I think has discouraged people is the culture of it. But if you do some due diligence, and again, you're looking to be vulnerable, make sure you got a healthy culture where you see, and you got to test the waters a little bit. So sometimes you do some sharing, you see what happens with it. You know what I mean?
Share a little bit and then see
what happens. Share some boundaries. Then you go a little bit further. Don't go out there and just dump everything right out of the gate. Just test the relationship before you trust the relationship. And then I think also look at the leader too. Like, just look at the dynamics of the leader. Is the leader got a healthy marriage? Does the leader got a healthy family? Like, relative.
So important.
Nobody's perfect, but just do some homework before you start like giving your whole life over to this person. You're looking at the platform only. You're looking at the giftedness only. You're a fool if those are the only two things that you're looking at.
100%.
And then another thing that I think can happen sometimes with this whole idea of like, should I be vulnerable? Should I not be vulnerable? And struggling with openness and stuff like that. Oh God, what was it with the leader? I was just going to say, dang it.
It'll come back.
Yeah. Senior moment.
It's a 9
past
p.m.
9 o'clock.
It's a 9 p.m.
This is a 9 p.m.
Time to wrap it
podcast.
up.
We already
Yeah,
did.
on that note,
So I wanted to obviously great conversation. If you guys have
I had a good one.
further resources and stuff like that, you can send a DM to these two, not to me, just to them too. But I had
No, don't discredit yourself. I know you're saying that funny, but Mike leads and loves youth incredibly. But a man, you guys have been married a year now?
we're 8 months in. Yeah, just did 8 months.
around a year.
8 months, yes.
Come on, congratulations.
Yes, sir.
Big deal. This is a man of integrity, a man of God too. So you
you,
should
bud.
not discredit yourself.
Okay,
for that.
you can
You
DM
can
me,
counsel
too.
a lot of people.
Okay.
Matter of fact, don't DM me, DM him. He's a better counselor than I am, I'm sure.
I was at the gym today, and I reserved the right because you said I could be the visionary of the podcast.
100%.
So I'm going to do a quick little segment. It's going to be called Off the Cuff. Okay, I'm going to ask one question. It's not going to be it's not going to be a long segment. I'm going to do a little segment. It's called Off the Cuff.
All right.
How do you feel about that?
There we go.
I wanted to ask a question to both of you. It's a little bit lighter. I hope you'll enjoy
Praise
it.
the Lord.
I know this was a heavy podcast. I'm like, I got to find a way to get out of this thing. My Lord. I officiated a wedding last night. I always rip off Devon's notes. Like,
Did you really? You officiated with it
I
last
did.
night?
I
Oh.
did. It was awesome.
Wait,
This
did
is
you
the
ask my
second
permission?
one.
I'm
Second
sorry.
one.
Did you ask my
Did
permission?
you know
Second
that? Yeah,
What's
it's the
that?
second one.
Yeah, so I ripped
just mirroring everybody.
I ripped off Devon's notes.
All right.
I did what
you
I
said
did.
yes to that, right? Okay.
Babe, don't steal the thunder.
You cried through the whole
That's
thing?
the question,
What a
babe.
freaking loser, dude.
I did. I cried through the whole thing. I have an issue. I was like, so it was one of my childhood best friends. And I was at the altar. They started walking down, and I'm starting to get teary-eyed. And twice throughout the ceremony, I was getting teary. I'm like, my gosh, I can't hold this thing together. So he dances with his mom, and I'm like boo-hooing. Like I'm just sitting. He was by far my best friend growing up. And I thought about, especially the season of life both of you are in right now, where there's transition in your family and you guys have had grieving and loss. And I was kind of reminiscing a little bit. I'm like, I didn't think I realized how important beautiful, good relationships were. And like how special. I'm like, I haven't engaged in a relationship with him for a decade. And I come back and I'm officiating his wedding and I'm crying and I'm so happy and I'm joyful and I'm like,
awesome.
I'm dancing with him and his mom. And so maybe to end it on a lighter note than where we started, maybe like what in your stage of your guys' life do you see in relationships? I mean, you're 56 now. Mm-hmm. And so maybe some stuff for some young wisdom on some young men that are just hustling and bustling and building and grinding and building businesses. Yeah. And then all of their friendships are going by the wayside. They're not doing stuff. So what would you say to a young man or woman?
Stop it.
And that's that. Thank you guys so much.
Well, have a great. I'll let you close it. I'm in that right now, where to be honest, my head has been down.
We've been talking about this a lot.
This has been probably the predominant
I
conversation.
mean, the
since
conference you
ironic
just
to bring
went
it up.
to, all that.
Yeah, crazy story with this. My head has been down, and I have just been working, grinding, hustling, building ministry, now even in business. And to be totally honest with you, I have neglected relationships pretty badly, pretty poorly. I have not done a very good job, to the point where my heart was starting to feel it. He noticed it. And I literally went down to, this was a crazy story, it just happened to me. I literally just went down to Nashville, Tennessee. I go down there for a Think conference. And the only reason I'm going down there, I don't know anything about the agenda. I know nothing about who's speaking. I didn't even look at any of that stuff. I'm going down there to find friends. That's the only thing that's going down there for.
Wow.
And I said yes to him because of that.
Because of
purpose.
that.
I didn't even care about the conference. That's what he wanted to go
So
for.
I pitched it to him. So I arrive in Nashville. I walk in. You know, it's that immediate, a little nervousness as you're walking in there because I don't even know who's there. I'm going down to Nashville by myself. You know, drinking energy drink just to get like socially, buzzed.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, hey guys, I'm just gonna be off the walls. Hey, what's up? My name's Devon. You know, I'm the Energizer Bunny. Walk in there, first person I see.
I know you're gonna hate me after this because I'm a spaz.
Exactly. So I walk in there. First person I see is a guy named Felipe, and he is a youth pastor here in Framingham.
No way.
And I see him in Nashville. The Lord immediately convicted me, and He goes, "I have already sent you good people.
No way.
You have not
They're right in your
invested in
town,
them."
but I want to introduce you to him in
And so
Nashville.
he goes, and I'm gonna reintroduce you to him
Oh my gosh.
to invest in this relationship, even though he's from your same city. Not only does he pastor in Framingham, he lives in Milford. He lives in the same city as me, like the same neighborhood around the same neighborhood. Not only that, I see Felipe. I go, bro, you're here. I didn't know you're here. And
Their
I go,
fence, they share a fence. No, I'm just kidding.
Exactly.
I throw a rock and it hits. And then I see my friends from Florida and Jordan and Dylan Bazette. They walk in, they slap me on the back. But I go, Jordan, you here? I see Keenan
Wow,
Clark
no
from
way.
Texas. I see multiple people. And the
was a
Lord
gift from
basically
God.
just tells me, he goes, I have already sent you good people. You have not invested in them.
Wow. Wow.
And so I had to quite literally repent and be like, I need to prioritize this more because my focus has been on build, grind, hustle, grow.
Yeah.
And those are all good things in and of themselves, but not at the neglect of relationships.
Yeah,
And there are
that's
some
good.
relationships, honestly, here in Mass, in my own church, that I need to make right.
Hmm.
I live by this principle. Some relationships were destined to grow apart. Some relationships grow apart because you didn't do your part.
Yeah, that's good.
And that's where I've been at.
That's really good.
Couldn't say it better. I think we just got to be really intentional at that season, that grind season that you're in, sons are in, because you can be building all these things and have nobody at the end of it to share it with and to enjoy it with, and that would be just a terrible thing, And so I had to learn. It's funny because he's struggling that and being vulnerable, but he poked on me because here I was a much older man. In a sense, and he's like, Pops, it seems like you're not having fun. And what can happen is you can just get, in a sense, you just become a machine and not a man anymore. You just become like addicted to ministry instead of like the heart of ministry.
And I didn't want to be in ministry.
The heart of
I didn't want that
ministry is
life.
relationships, not productivity
It's like
and
the
results.
whole. It's the whole basis of
The
ministry.
whole basis
Yeah.
is relationships. And then I'm looking around, and just like him, he was saying this. Thankfully, he's learned so much earlier than me. This is a generational thing that we need to fix. But I was like in my 40s before I had like a circle of friends that I could do life with, tell anything, go anywhere, super close to. And I have that now, like literally like brothers, blood
Like
brothers.
Zenzo and Eli. And,
Zenzo,
Yeah,
Eli,
yeah.
and Chris Gepner, and Dan Stoffer, and
Yeah.
Q, and Randy. Like, I say it all the time now. I just changed this recently. It's a funny story. But I always say, I'm not rich, but I am rich in relationships. But since my mother died, now I'm rich. And I'm rich in relationships.
That's awesome.
So I can't say that anymore.
All those envelopes. All those envelopes.
Shout out to
they're
Rolex.
added up.
Rolex. We're looking for sponsors. Rolex, sponsor us. Sponsor us. Oh, that's got to
Wrap this thing up. We're done.
All right, y'all. We love you guys so much. Thank you for tuning in to Like Father, Like Son. You can like, subscribe, do whatever you got to do.
Seriously.
And we'll see you next time.
And he's rich. I was like, I can't not say it.